Cerberus narrations. Because who needs sleep anyway?
I was raised in a fairly strict but loving Christian household in the Bible Belt. My parents weren't at all unreasonable in their rules, and were well-intentioned, but I broke a few along the way, like most teenagers do. The summer before I started college, I began a relationship with a slightly older guy. I knew him from high school, and he was attending the college I would soon be at. Johnny was a catch. He was exceptionally handsome, had been on the football team, and was on a full academic scholarship. Funny, talented, and very personable. There was little to not like about him. We bonded over our teetotalism and love of pranking. The best part? He had his own apartment at the college, which was a 4-hour drive from my parents' house. I could easily sneak up there under the guise of visiting one of my other friends, or spending the night at a local girlfriend's house. My parents didn't even have to know I had a boyfriend. Now, I had just turned 18, and was enjoying my rebellious streak and newfound freedom, but I still happily lived under my parents' guidance and rules for a large part. They always encouraged me to be a free thinker, and to ultimately figure out my own morals and values, and I ended up much like them, because they're honestly that awesome. My mum, wisely, encouraged me not to just sleep with anyone, and it was something I actually held quite strongly. So, while I had no qualms having sleepovers with my boyfriend, I was intent on not having sex with him. He took it pretty well, and seemed to respect my decision. One week, smack dab in the middle of summer, I had 3 days off in a row at work. A drive up to see Johnny was in order, and I began my travels early in the morning. He was excited to see me, and we had a great day. Nerf gun wars, reading Stephen King, and making out. We went out for dinner, and returned for a night of shenanigans. Or so I thought. Upon entering his apartment, Johnny produced a box of condoms. He had tried this before, so I wasn't fazed, and adamantly told him it wasn't happening. The events that unfolded following this seemingly unimportant interaction still haunt me today. Johnny's smile disappeared, and his eyes went cold. Hauntingly cold. I was sitting at his dining room table, with my back against the wall. He was standing at the other end of the table. You make me sick. I'm sick of you. You play me. All you do is play me. We were serial pranksters, and sarcastic in every sense of the word. While his countenance made my skin crawl, I knew he was joking. I'd known Johnny for years, after all. I've thought about this for a long time. And you're dead. I'm not doing this anymore. You make me so sick. I hate you, and you're dead. He was unnervingly calm, and his voice betrayed a slight hint of anger I'd never heard before. I noticed him clenching his fists. Popped out veins tracing up his arms. For the first time in our entire relationship, I felt unsafe with him. He held my gaze, unblinking. His second-floor apartment was on campus. It was summer. I had seen nobody else in the building. No other cars in the parking lot. Even if I could get past him, which I couldn't. My two options were unlocking the balcony door and jumping, or racing 15 feet down the hallway to the dead-bolted front door, which opened inwardly, and getting down a flight of stairs. Either scenario led to an empty parking lot. I would have to get to my car, or run into the woods nearby. While athletic, I had no chance against him physically. I focused on him. Half of me just knew he was kidding. He had to be. He would break into laughter any second now, and we would return to our beautiful day. He continued talking. I can't repeat what he said. It was too graphic and specific to our location to tell the public. He detailed the sexual assault he had in store for me. If I survived, I would be strangled in the nearby woods, then carted off and dumped at a secluded spot we had explored together. He motioned to some bags he had on his counter. "That's where your body will be within an hour." I had enough. His plan was too well thought out to be impromptu. I'm small, but I'm stubborn, and would fight to the death if I had to. I also have a wicked straight face when I need to. It was my turn to hold his gaze with all the ferocity I could muster. I stood up and said the first thing that came to mind. I'm still proud of the unflinching calm I presented. Inside, I was begging God not to let me die. "You're real funny." I almost believed you for a second. Wouldn't have worked anyways, because what I was going to tell you before all that happened is my dad asked me to come home tonight. He needs help first thing in the morning with the garden for Mum's birthday. My brother hurt his back, and I told him I'd call him as soon as I was on the road, within half an hour. It was a lie, and not a particularly good one, but the delivery was convincing. I dangled my phone in his face and told him he could explain to my dad why I wasn't coming home tonight if he wanted me to stay. Johnny's mouth was agape as he stared at me. "I was just kidding," he mumbled, fists still clenched. "See ya," I chirped, pushing past him. My gamble paid off. I grabbed my purse and shuffled down the hallway. I could feel his eyes burning through me, and the electric energy in the room as I internally screamed at myself to move slowly. The deadbolt disengaged. I walked out and fought every urge to run down the stairs. I was too far from my car if he chased me to beat him, and I refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing me scared. I've always had a habit of parking as far out as possible. I walked the entire length of the car park, next to the woods he told me he would murder me in. I knew he was watching me the entire time. I could feel his eyes follow my every movement. As I drove out past his apartment, I saw his shadow in the balcony window. I waved. He stared. I drove a few miles to the nearest Walmart. It was only 8, and the sun was just starting to set. People milled through the parking lot, blissfully unaware of what I'd just gone through. I collapsed onto my steering wheel and broke down, bawling my eyes out. Then I drove the 4 hours back home. Stupidly, I didn't know how to process what happened, and banished it to the recesses of my mind. I spent the next few years avoiding Johnny. The few times I thought about it, I blamed myself for being so naive. I finally told my mum 4 years after the fact, and was able to process through it. So, possible murderer ex-boyfriend who thankfully now lives about 10,000 miles away from me, let's not meet again. So this happened when I was in 7th grade, a 12-year-old. At the time, it was just my mum, my brother, and I living in a rental, in a run-down, low-income area. We moved in during the summer, before the school year started, and were welcomed by our next-door neighbours, which wasn't too uncommon, but not super common at the same time for that area in Oregon. My mum worked 8 AM to 5 PM every day, so my little brother and I would ride the bus home every day from school. My cousin would also sometimes ride back to my house with us, and her parents would pick her up later. One day when I came home, I noticed our only small laptop we owned was gone off the counter. I figured my mum had moved it. Later, when my mum came home, we realised it was missing, and that a lot of other things were missing, like my iPod, and wallet, and my mum's safe with her handgun in it, and lots of family valuables. We called the cops and reported a robbery, and they came to investigate. They determined the person probably slid through the doggy door leading into the garage, and then entered the house through our unlocked garage door. Cops stayed in their cars on the curb all night, and said they would stay on watch for our house more than normal. I was terrified all night, and my brother and I slept in my mum's room. The next day, we locked all our doors. It was Wednesday, and it was a random half day at my school, so I rode the bus home around noon, and my cousin came with, while my brother went to a friend's house for the afternoon to hang out. I used the key under the mat my mum leaves for me, and my cousin and I hung out for about an hour or two, until her mum came and picked her up. After she left, I hear the doorknob of the closet right next to the front door slowly open, and out comes this skinny, what looked like a 35-year-old man that I recognised as our next door neighbour. He seemed to be constantly shaking, intense eyes, had a really unhealthy look to him because of his extremely sunken-in face. Terrified, I'm in the living room just standing, looking at him while he looks at me, with a surprised look on his face. I think he thought everyone left when my cousin did. His surprised look changed to an amused smirk when I believe he realised I was alone in the house. He begins to walk towards me, while I stand there shocked, not sure what to do. He grabs me real hard on the shoulders and tells me I'm pretty. He then begins to pull me into him, to I think, lick me. I don't know. He seemed crazy and excitable with his intense eyes. I instinctively jump and buckle my knees to allow my full weight to be the force that rips me from his grips, and I fall on my butt. He then bends down for me when I heel kick him in his nuts as hard as I can. He then yells and falls to his knees, cupping himself. I use that time to run past him to my front door. I open it and run to a kid I rode the bus with, who lives about 6 houses down. He and his mum were there, and she called the cops, as well as my mum while I waited. The cops got to the house, and he wasn't there, but had managed to steal a few more small valuables. I gave my testimony that it was our next door neighbour, and he was later caught, that same day, selling some of our stuff at the pawn shop in town. It turns out, he was a crystal meth addict, stealing our stuff to sell and pay for his addiction. He was super weak from all the drug abuse, which is probably why I was able to get away from him. He also was apparently somewhat high, which he claimed heightened him sexually, which is why he spontaneously decided to attack me, being that I was alone. He had apparently watched us for a few months, learning our schedules for when we left and got home. He took the time to take the key from under the front door mat while we were gone, get a copy, and then put the original back under the mats for my brother and I to use when we got home. The cops were surprised he was smart enough to do that, as he seemed to be mostly dim-witted with everything else, due to the drug abuse. Either way, I testified against his physical attack, and he got a few decades of jail time, being that he was already on parole for drugs. I was terrified, and slept in my mum's room for the next year. So, let's not ever meet again, creepy meth-addicted neighbour.